Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another episode of A Real Point of View here on our YouTube channel. My name is Greg Morgan. I am the Real Movie Guy, and I'm your host for this evening. And joining me are my two cohorts in film crime, we'll say, Miss Karen D, and she is the movie maven. And we have Mr. Stephen C, and he is the man who doesn't pick a bad movie. So welcome you guys to the show. And tonight is one of a little different topic wise in a theme of our show tonight. Tonight's theme really deals with finding movies. You know, we have a lot of movies out there that have all these titles. And a lot of times the titles are a little misleading and don't always give you a good understanding about what you're about to see. But we decided to pick a few movies, just a few, to talk about for our show tonight, where the actual title really has a lot to do with what's going on in the film. Now, I was trying to remember a title that I had or heard that you're not really sure what you're getting from the actual essence of the title. And one of those titles that came to mind for me was from some of the movies that were actually nominated for Best Picture in the most recent Oscars. The Shape of Water, for example. It really doesn't tell you what's going on in the film necessarily. The Shape of Water could be, you can stretch it out, it's buoyant, put it in a sphere, it's heavy. Shape of Water could mean a whole bunch of different things.
So what you're saying is it's not as generic as Titanic.
Correct. But even Titanic, we know it's about the Titanic, and the movie is about the Titanic. So that's one of the movies that actually comes to mind that makes sense for its title. But like I said, Shape of Water, not so much. Billboards, for example, makes sense because you do see the billboards in the film. It's about those billboards that are set up. Now, obviously, you're not getting the true essence of what the additional meanings are necessarily in the film, but at least you have an idea that we're going to be seeing some billboards, right?
That's true. There are some billboards in the picture.
And it was in Missouri. And yes, the billboards were in Missouri.
That's true.
That's true. But going back to The Shape of Water, can you tell me what that's about just by the title?
It's about water that's in a funny shape.
That's a possibility, but no.
I just, this is a trick question.
It's just in a funny shape. Oh, thank you, Karen.
Maybe the water's murky and the shape of water is bad because you can't drink it.
Maybe the water is in a glass and it's the shape of the glass and that's the shape.
Well, maybe the glass is half full and that's the shape. Maybe it's half empty and that's the shape.
Okay, let's not get technical.
Maybe it's in good shape. Maybe it's the greatest water you'll ever drink.
So your point would be what?
Oh wait, we were supposed to make a point.
The Shape of Water is about humanity, and it's about saving that humanity, using your humanity to save a life. It's about romance, love. It's about the strangeties of romance, cruelty. It has so many other things that it's about, but it's really not so much having to do with the shape of the water. Not really.
Right. Got it. And we're moving on.
Wow, Karen.
I mean, I guess, I don't know. You're right. You're right. You're absolutely right.
As Greg is saying, there are a lot of titles out there that go on being very deceiving of what they are.
Well, I'm trying to rack my brain trying to come up with some, and
well, for instance, my one of my movies, Message from the King. It really is, in context, where you say Message from the King, you think it's very self-explanatory. He is delivering a message to somebody, which he is doing. But the way you would naturally deliver messages is not anywhere present. Like, you're not sending somebody a letter. You're not making a phone call. You're he's doing it the old-fashioned way, as I like to say, the mafia way almost.
Well, why don't you continue on, Steve? Since that's one of your movies, Message from the King.
The Message from the King came out in 2016, and it's kind of gotten a little. It's an under-the-radar movie starring Chadwick Boseman, which I firmly believe that he used this character and this type of aggression moving into the Black Panther movies, because you have a character that has a very calmness about himself, a very calculated approach to the way he goes about things, because of course in Black Panther he is actually a king, where in this movie his last name is King. And but you also, there is a more brutal side to him when it becomes necessary and when he feels it's present. And in both cases, it is for the sake of, well, in one it's for the sake of protecting, and the other it's for the sake of avenging, and it's not in the context that you would think that it would be, or fitting the movie that you think it would be. Haha, Avengers joke. Everybody? Nobody?
Oh,
right there, way over
wow.
here. Cool. No, that's
yeah,
cool.
that completely
That's cool.
went over
Fine.
my head.
Whatever. So, Chadwick Boseman plays Jacob King. He's a man from South Africa, and he gets a phone call from his sister, and she sounds like she's in trouble. She says that there's some men that are trying to get something she has, and she needs help. So he gathers what he can and leaves. And it's very interesting to see the very beginning of this movie when he's being interrogated. And this is the first step to see how much of a calculated person that he is, in my opinion. He doesn't answer any questions in the traditional way that somebody asks a question, you answer. He actually reads between the lines of their questioning and gives them answers that he knows that they would want to have, or that would be easy for him to get out of this situation and be able to move forward.
Mm-hmm.
So he gets to Los Angeles. He's trying to find a place to stay, and then he ends up happening on this cheap motel. Then he goes to find his sister. He goes to her last known address. She's not there. He ends up talking to the neighbor, which is played by Natalie Martinez, who's not necessarily an underrated actress, but she's never really been high profile in very many
she's
movies.
not as well known, but she is a good actress. She's just not as well known.
But he ends up telling her, she tells him, your sister's kind of fallen in a bad way. Her husband split and left town and left her with his kid, and kind of gives him a little bit of information about what's been going on, and basically it becomes a puzzle that he's trying to put together. Well, he ends up finding his sister, but he doesn't find her in the way that you would want to see her. She ends up being at the morgue, and he doesn't identify the body to anyone, but he identifies her by a tattoo that she has on her arm, which you come to find out later. Him and their brother have all matching tattoos, which are see no evil, speak no evil, and hear no evil. And that's how he notices her. Well, while trying to find information, he ends up finding someone who was seen in a photo with her. So now he's hugely upset. He's angry. He wants to go find out what's going on. And this is where you really get to see this darker side of this character and this building aggression that he has. And you're just going, oh, he's going to get he's going to get his information and he's going to take no prisoners. He literally takes no prisoners. He walks into a hardware store and grabs a bike chain, breaks it, and then wraps it around his hand. Then goes chasing after people. He ends up going to this car wash, finds the guys, just messes them up really, really badly. And he ends up grabbing one guy, taking him back, finding out the information that he needs. And this is the part where the title comes into play. Of course, his name being Jacob King. After he just beats up the hitman brutally, he tells them, "You tell your boss that this is a message from the king." And he says it in such a aggressive and authoritative and demonstrative tone of like, this is what's coming. This is what's going to happen. I'm going to do this to every single person that I have to in order to find out why all of this happened. And you slowly meet Luke Evans, who is, or Paul Wentworth, played by Luke Evans of Dracula Untold, of the Hobbit series. He does a fine job playing his character. He's a dentist to kind of all the stars and celebrities. And he puts together things for them, things that these politicians and movie stars and directors don't want people to know about. He's kind of that under guy that gets everything done without anybody really being seen or noticed. We come to Alfred Molina playing Mike Preston, who does a really good job playing a terrible person that thinks he's a good person. And it's not that it's not that he does brutally horrible things. It's just he's a pedophile.
Oh, just that.
Just that.
Just a minor character flaw.
He doesn't see himself in that way. He sees himself
as
caring and loving, and he's got a kind of a twisted sense about himself, but he's also he gets cornered very easily and reacts emotionally very fast. And Molina does a really good job, in my opinion, with this character and what he has to work with. But the movie just follows Kane trying to figure out what his sister had, how he figured everything out, meeting people that are in similar situations as to what his sister was in, and seeing how L.A. is probably not right. Is
like a master manipulator.
Right. And he does a really, really good job of manipulating all situations, but he sees an environment that he grew up in. He sees an environment with the drugs and the crime and people getting used, and he tries at points to be a better person and to do good things with other people. And but he's really just there to beat the crap out of everybody and kill some people. And he succeeds. Honestly, there's a couple things about the movie I wish they would have added another 20 minutes to the movie to cover, to kind of tie up some loose ends. But I feel like they did a good job of presenting, this is the point. This is where he's got to get to. Once he figures this out and once he moves past this, there's really nothing else to keep him here. Mm-hmm. And then he goes back to South Africa. And you can see when you get to the end of the movie, he's still in control of his situation, and he's still manipulative to the people that know him well. And it's because he doesn't seem to be a very no. He doesn't seem to be a very outwardly emotional person. And you pick that up as the movie's going. He is deciphering every single instant he is in contact with any other person as to better manipulate the situation to himself. And you see it at the end too.
Interesting.
And to me, I saw this movie too, and I really enjoyed it. And the cool thing about this movie is, as it goes through its true journey, it's not a overly expensive film, but at the same time, you get all the points that you need, and it was done well with the budget that they had, and it has a surprise ending to me. So, yeah, I'm with you, Steve. This is a really good movie.
Interesting.
So, Karen, what have you got on for your movies? You said you were going to pick one before the other, and it's
well,
the one that you brought on later, actually.
The first movie that I'd like to talk about is one of my favorite movies, one of my all-time favorite movies. It's a movie called Suspicion. It's one of Alfred Hitchcock's most well-known films. It's made in 1941, and the title does explain exactly what the movie's about. It's about suspicion and how suspicion arises between people. And in this case, it's about the movie is about a young woman who meets a gentleman in a chance meeting on a train, and he's very charming, and he sort of pursues her. And she falls in love with him, and they get married. And then she starts suspecting him of strange motives because things just don't add up. He's caught in a lie. He's caught in sort of dissembling. He sort of doesn't quite tell the whole truth. But he's so charming that he gets away with it. But then at some point she's like, is he like some sort of sociopath? Is he killing people around me? Am I next? So she's suspecting him. So this man is her husband, but she suspects that he might actually kill her. So that's what the movie's about. It stars Joan Fontaine and Cary Grant. And Nigel Bruce is in this movie. Leo G. Carroll is in this movie. There are a number, practically like British royalty in this movie, and it was directed by Alfred Hitchcock. Joan Fontaine won Best Actress in 1942 for her acting in Suspicion. Cary Grant not only didn't win Best Actor, he wasn't even nominated, and I thought he did quite a good job in this movie. So it's kind of interesting that he didn't even get nominated for an Oscar for this movie. I believe Alfred Hitchcock was nominated for Best Director, but he did not win either. And what's interesting about this movie is just the way that Alfred Hitchcock sort of sets up these characters. I mean, he's a very visual director, and this is one of the first movies that he did once he broke with Selznick. And so he had a lot more creative control in this on this particular movie than he had in earlier movies. And he took a lot of liberties in terms of how he shot things. This movie is famous for the scene where Cary Grant's character Johnny Aisgarth is bringing a glass of milk to Joan Fontaine's character, and as he walks up the stairs, they're in kind of a mansion. He walks up the stairs, and the milk just looks really eerie, like a glow, like it's glowing from within, because we know, or we think, he's bringing her poisoned milk. She's not feeling well. He offers to bring her milk. It's probably poisoned. Ew. So as he carries us up the stairs, the milk takes on this really eerie quality. Well, famously, how Alfred Hitchcock got that shot was he had a light bulb suspended from a height, and the light bulb glowed in the glass of milk. So as Cary Grant walked it up the stairs, that's why the milk looks so eerie. So he does things like that, which are really, just awesome. Just very creative. Alfred Hitchcock is famous for completely storyboarding. I mean, down to practically every second of a movie. So before he ever takes a shot, I mean, he was an artist himself. He could draw very well. And he insisted on storyboarding everything. This movie also was very controversial because of the way that it ended. I won't say exactly how it ended, but the way that it ended was markedly different from the way in which it was perceived to be ended, and markedly different from the book on which it was based. It was based on, let me see, I do have the name of the book here. Before the Fact. It was a book, it was based on a book called Before the Fact. And Alfred Hitchcock bought the rights to the book, and the book had a lot more detail about the Johnny Aisgarth character. But here was what was going on. This is 1941, where, you know, America is, if they're not in the war yet, they're about to be in the war by the end of the year, World War II. And, you know, Cary Grant's British, so he's on the Allied side. And it's sort of like almost like a matter of national security not to show Cary Grant in a way that implies that somehow he is just irredeemable. Before doing this movie, he had done a lot of hero type parts. I mean, he was a leading man. So in this movie, there was a lot of tug of war about, you know, can he really be the murderer? Can we just pretend that he's the murderer, but then kind of just make everybody relieved that he's really not the murderer? Or do we really show him off to be a murderer? And if we do, you know, how do we do that so that people can still like him? Or do we just make him completely evil and you know, all this back and forth? So there was like an ending that, I mean, what Alfred Hitchcock ended up doing, because I mean, he did have bosses to deal with, even though he had a great deal of creative control, he left the ending of the movie somewhat ambiguous. And to this day, people argue about what the ending really means. And that's all I'll say about that. Joan Fontaine and Cary Grant were not the first choices to play the lead roles in this movie. Alfred Hitchcock's first choices were Laurence Olivier and Francis D, but apparently they weren't available. Also, Cary Grant and Joan Fontaine did not get along on the set. Apparently, Cary Grant didn't like Joan Fontaine for a couple of reasons. One, he thought she was unprofessional, spoiled, and petulant. Two, he really resented the fact that Alfred Hitchcock was, you know, being, well, let's just say #MeToo. Alfred Hitchcock would not have survived #MeToo, because there was a picture of him next to, you know, just sexually harassing his leading ladies in the dictionary. So he paid a lot of attention to Joan Fontaine. And Cary Grant felt that he paid so much attention to Joan Fontaine that it was to his detriment as an actor and to the character Johnny Aisgarth in the movie. And it really stuck in Cary Grant's craw when Joan Fontaine not only was nominated, but actually won Best Actress. And he's like, and I got nothing. And I was only the guy who did all the work. And women are like, yeah, well, we've been in it. We know exactly what that's like. So you have that. And then you have the book in which the leading character, there's a lot more explanation and a lot more actions that the character undertakes that are very nefarious. And these are things that never show up in the movie. This is one of the first films that Alfred Hitchcock produced. There was a producer who was called on to do the movie, but he was fired, and then Alfred Hitchcock ended up becoming the producer. this movie just, to me, just has a lot of really interesting touches about personality and just the way that a husband and wife might relate to each other. You know, you have Cary Grant sort of having like this slightly demeaning, just ever so slightly demeaning attitude toward his wife. And like he calls her monkey face, which is at first blush a term of affection, but you know, on second take, it's like, you know, is he calling her stupid, or is he calling her ugly, or ugly and stupid? What is going on with that name? And she comes off as this very shy, very naive woman, but a woman who also, she's not like incredibly wealthy, but she's pretty well to do. And like if she never got married, she would be set for life. So a running theme in the film is whether Johnny Aisgarth is after, did he just marry her for her money? Because she wasn't bringing much to the table in the looks department. She wasn't glamorous. She wasn't social. She was very sheltered and all this sort of thing. So those sorts of things are interesting to watch, that interplay between them. And what I also like about this movie is that although it's a rather dark movie, the name of the movie is Suspicion, Alfred Hitchcock cannot resist just inserting his comedic touches. And there are plenty of them through the book, especially with Leo G. Carroll. And there's another, one of their friends who considers herself a sleuth, like a amateur sleuth, brings a couple of lighthearted touches to the movie as well. So I think Hitchcock is brilliant about sort of inserting these lighter moments into a dark movie. And he's also really brilliant about inserting darker moments into lighter areas of his movies. He's really good at mixing it up. And it just keeps the audience engaged and interested. Cary Grant does a fabulous job, and he probably should have been nominated for Best Actor. Maybe he even should have won in 1942. I'm not going to say that, but he certainly should have been nominated. He did a lot of heavy lifting that just wasn't acknowledged by the Academy in this movie. And it's, you know, the storyline is well written. And I think Alfred Hitchcock does a very good job of sort of deftly managing the political aspects of having to keep Cary Grant likable, but having Cary Grant play this rather, you know, and morally ambiguous character. And then you've got Joan Fontaine, who, yeah, I mean, typical woman, you know, naive and sheltered and all that other stuff, but she's also, as it turns, you know, she's not stupid. So she's trying to figure out, you know, how to save her life, you know. And so that interplay is interesting, especially when you consider it was 1941 when the movie was made. So
cool. Now, a little bit of a segue from that, staying on Alfred Hitchcock's shirt sleeve here. The movie that I have for my movie is called Saboteur. And Saboteur is also a Hitchcock film, and it came out the following year in 1942. And this stars Robert Cummings and Priscilla Lane. The essence of this film is Robert Cummings and his friend, his best friend, work at an aircraft factory. And Robert Cummings, who is Barry Kane, one day at the factory, you know, factory security is dull because they've had issues with people trying to sabotage different parts of the production lines, not just at this factory, but other factories and other places. Now, this is also taking place, as Karen alluded in her film, just before, during the essence of the beginning of World War II. And so people who weren't in the military, especially men not in the military, were working in all these different places to try to help the war effort. And the aircraft factory is one of those places. So Barry and his best friend work at this factory. Well, one day, someone said, hey, there's a fire. Someone set a fire. And so everyone's trying to get out of the factory. And Barry also, too, he and his friend trying to get out of the factory. But Barry's friend is trying to help the effort and is trying to do what he can to try to put the fire out. And he's like, Barry's like, come on, we need to get out of here. And he says, no, we got to try to help, And so Barry decides, well, I'm going to help my friend try to help, extinguish this fire. So this guy who's over there that they see, he hands Barry this fire extinguisher, and Barry hands it to his friend, his best friend. His best friend opens up the fire extinguisher, and it's a accelerant instead of a fire extinguisher. And so friend burns. So his friend burns to death. And of course, it makes the fire worse. And so Barry's like, oh my God, and he looks to see where this guy is who gave him the fire extinguisher, and that guy's gone. So when other people come to try to help the situation, the fire department, everybody comes, the only person they see is Barry. So they think he's the saboteur. So Barry is like, okay, people are looking at me funny. I need to get out of here. So the essence of this film is Barry's trying to, survive and get away, but he also needs to find out who set this fire. Who was that guy? So the movie takes him on his journey trying to find out who this guy is, trying to get the FBI and the police and anybody who is after him to put their attentions on the guy who truly set the fire. And Robert Cummings does a really good job in this. He also is very sensitive to the fact that his best friend has died. So now in his heart, he wants to avenge that. He wants to find out who did it. He feels that he's somewhat responsible for his best friend dying. So he tries to go to his best friend's mother to try to get her to understand what happens. And of course, it just puts more grief out there. And the only person that he can trust is a lady named Miss Martin, who is Priscilla Lane. And so she's the only one who kind of truly believes him. And so the two of them do what they can to try to figure it out. But that means, they've got to go to different places because they're trying to find a lead of who this guy is. And they keep, every once in a while, he'll see him and he'll like, he's out on the chase. So this movie is about the essence of what it really says. It is a saboteur, a person who helped set this fire and is trying to stop the war effort in the United States to, from gaining any advantage in World War II. So this is a really good film. I came across it quite by accident and really enjoyed the suspense in the movie. And all the quirky things that happen in order for this guy to try to find who actually set this fire. I mean, he's not a sleuth. He's not a detective. He's just a guy who lost a friend. And he's a guy who worked in a factory. So whatever the world thinks about people, one of the cool things about this is it doesn't matter who you are. If you're determined and if you're up for the fight, you can be assertive and get things done, even though you're not necessarily a professional. And so this is a really good movie. I'm not going to destroy the ending or give anything away other than the way it starts is by sabotage. And you're trying to find the person who did it, the true person who did it, not the person who's accused of doing it, but the real person who set the fire and caused it to this guy to lose his friend. So another Hitchcock thriller in the Hitchcock motif. So I think people will really enjoy it. So that's mine. It's exactly what the title is, a saboteur.
Nice.
It's awesome. It's good. I mean, it's Hitchcock, and Hitchcock is amazing.
Hitchcock is amazing.
I mean,
And Peter Cummings
obviously,
does a really good job.
as Karen says, a terrible person, but Hitchcock is amazing.
He was quite a talented director, that's for sure.
Let's say his efforts in film were spot on.
Yeah.
Social things,
All right,
obviously not so much.
Yeah. That one works.
So what's your other film, Steve?
I'm sticking with kind of the new. Talk about the second movie in a set series. Batman is so well beloved by so many people as a comic, in the movie genre, minus a couple misses. Cartoons, everything. But the movie I want to talk about, which is ironically, other than the first movie, Batman, uh, the only one that really matches the title. Um, and that's The Dark Knight film. So, following the theme, this is where we get the first introduction in Christopher Nolan's series. Well, the only introduction in Christopher Nolan's series of the Joker, played by Heath Ledger. I don't know, in my opinion, of movies that I've seen that someone has played a villain, in my opinion, so well, especially one that is so has so many versions, has so many different styles, has been adapted by a multitude of actors and in some case actresses, because but that's a comic thing for another time. Um, and to see the way he brought it to life, the way he gave essence to this maniacal, insane, crazy character. It's very, very cool. Yet, oh my God, he went there. That's so dangerous. Don't do that. And then of course after this movie, Heath Ledger had died from an accidental prescription drug overdose. So this movie was kind of a big dedication part to his legacy in film, and probably the biggest role he'd ever played. But to the movie starts off very well, setting up the kind of character that the Joker's going to be. Of course, we saw the first movie, we got the introduction to Christian Bale's Batman, the transformation into becoming him, with the Scarecrow being the villainous character of that one. And now we get into this crazy, maniacal character that we all know and some of us love and some of us can't stand. And they build him up so well, and he actually competes throughout the movie with Christian Bale as an actor, and it just overshadows him and almost everyone else by how well a job he does. But he's crazy. He goes back and forth between sanity and insane in just middle conversation. The hunched over kind of expression, the way he kind of actually has a little bit of a lean to him, the appearance that he has, the way the story changes. You want to know how I got these scars? It every time he tells the story, he tells it different, which has always been kind of a motif for that character. But he goes, and the first thing we see is him being so crazy that he gets a bunch of guys together and he robs a mob bank. Like, who doesn't think that's amazing? So, and you really get a look into his character immediately from they're robbing the bank. They've gone in, they've cuffed everybody, or tie strapped them down, guns in their face. Anybody who talks dies, the whole thing. What they didn't know is the vice president of the bank is sitting in an office that's facing the opposite way of the way they walked in. So they never could have seen him unless they really turned and looked. And he's got a shotgun and is ready to be like, all right, we're going to deal with this problem. And, who's crazy enough to rob a mob bank? He ends up getting one of his guys shot. He ends up getting one of his guys run over by a bus strictly on timing. And then he shoots the guy that hops out of the bus to help him. So he does have a rational smartness to a genius about him for timing and such things. But then he doesn't care about anybody else. He just shoots everybody. And as he's starting to leave, the vice president of the bank, which shot one of his buddies, I wouldn't say buddy, cohorts, begins to yell at him. Do you know who you're stealing from? And he walks over. Do you know what's going to happen? And he walks over, and of course he's wearing a mask on top of the face paint that he's already got on. So nobody recognizes you anyway. What's the point of the mask? It adds to the psychosis that you're watching unfold. He literally goes, what doesn't kill you takes the mask off, makes you stranger. And this is the first time you see Ledger's face with the Joker paint and everything. And it's completely different from anything we'd ever seen. It looks more psychotic and crazy and weird in the way that he's done it, because it just looks jagged. There's no form to it. And what doesn't kill you makes you stranger. And then he sticks a grenade in the guy's mouth.
Oh God, yes.
Oh, this is terrible. And of course he's got a string where he's pulling it out and it's hooked to his body, and he hops in the bus and he gets ready to drive the bus away, and then all of a sudden, tink, and you see the guy's face and he's going crazy, and it's a smoke grenade. It's just smoke billowing out of it. It's not really an explosive grenade or anything. So that adds to the craziness about it.
Yeah.
Well, and then, so.
May I interject one thing?
Of course.
I don't know if anybody knows anything about movies, music from the 60s and 70s, early soul and R&B film music. But the unveiling of the mask reminds me of the song by Smokey Robinson called "Tears of a Clown," where the clown is not just made up, but when the clown cries, the makeup gets all smeared because of the tears, and that he's this clown that's not a successful clown, but yet a clown nevertheless who has something wrong with him. And that just made me think of that song. I'm sorry, Steve. Go ahead.
Interesting.
Oh no, that's really an interesting take on that. I don't think the Joker is sad at all. I don't think he has the capacity to be sad, to be honest. Right. But I can see where emotion would be upon that. Like, you could tell the emotions upon the makeup, because the emotion is erratic, therefore the makeup is erratic and things like that. But we go through the movie, we see Batman working with Lieutenant Jim Gordon. Lieutenant at this point in time in the movie. Gordon, played by Gary Oldman, of course, Batman, played by Christian Bale. And they are working with, or trying to work with, Aaron Eckhart, who is playing Harvey Dent. Who is playing Harvey Dent, who is the district attorney. And they're trying to catch a man. Well, they end up catching the man. He's kind of the money behind the mob. But they end up catching him. And this is where the Joker finally reveals himself to the mob. And it's like, that video, Batman doesn't have jurisdiction. Batman doesn't care if you go halfway across the world. Batman will find you, and Batman will, break your spine and bring you back, because that's what Batman does. And he presents himself to these mob guys, and of course, they're skeptical at first because, he's dressed like a clown. He's obviously crazy. But this is where you get to the second greatest part of this movie, and Heath Ledger's character, of where he makes a pencil disappear. inside of a man's skull. But
Oh.
it goes. Thank you, Karen. It goes to the craziness and the lengths that he's willing. This is a dangerous person. We have seen this guy being smart / crazy. Now we're seeing the true dangerousness of this person. He's not just the brains. He's actually got some fight to him too, even though it's a situation that ends like that. So he says, we're going to go at this at a different approach. All right, how are we going to go at this at a different approach? We're going to kill the Batman. That's what we're going to do. Well, if it's so easy, why haven't you already done it? If you're good at something, don't ever do it for free. Again, we see this insane person who's smart. So it's kind of that double way. He ends up figuring small things out. He ends up part of the way through the movie when Harvey Dent injects himself as being he was Batman. Of course, we know he's not. He ends up catching him, or the Joker captures him, and then they capture the Joker. And there's this little cat and mouse game between the Joker, Lieutenant Gordon, and Batman of, I'm going to give you what you want, but it's not going to be how you want it. Everything's on my terms. I control everything around me. And ends up, spoiler alert, the girl dies and Harvey Dent becomes Two-Face. If you've never read the comics, that's what happened. And then him turning Harvey Dent in this movie is very interesting in the way he does it. You tried to do everything by the book. You tried to do everything the way it's supposed to be done. And look what it got you. It got you landed in the hospital with half of your face blown off. The love of your life is gone. Why don't you just embrace this craziness around you? Why don't you just go out and do the things that you need to do? Get them done. Go out and kill people that need to be killed. It's perfectly fine. I do it all the time. This is the Joker we're talking about. And it goes both ways. At one point, the Joker gives Dent the ability to end it, to stop everything. He's like, you want to do this? That's fine. And he has the gun, and he puts it in Dent's hands, and he points it to his forehead. But what you don't specifically see, because you're paying attention to the gun on his forehead, you're paying attention to the flip of the coin that Two-Face has always been known for, that the Joker has his finger, where when the hammer's cocked back on the gun, his finger slides in, and if Dent were to pull the trigger, it wouldn't go off. It would stop the bullet from killing the Joker, and he would see Dent's intent or resolve had not broken. But instead, Dent doesn't pull the trigger. And then, once more, genius, insanity, blah, blah, blah. He ends up burning a gigantic pile of money, which is an amazing scene. It's a great scene by Heath Ledger in presentation. It's a great scene by the actors in their shocked face, background extras that are like, what did he just say? Do an amazing job for this one point where he's going to hit all this cash. And he pours gasoline on it. And then he lights one of the bills on fire and throws it on the pile. And the guy goes, what are you doing? I'm going to burn the cash. And he goes, that's all of our money. Don't worry, I'm only going to burn my half. If you have a big pile of money and you set half of it on fire, it's going to burn everything. And but as we're going, of course, if you haven't seen this movie by now, I apologize. You should go see this movie right now. I don't care. It's 1 a.m. now? Oh, it's 12:30 right now. Go see the movie right now. Like, go find somewhere, get the movie, come back.
I don't think you should tell our audience to leave the podcast to go see the movie. They can wait until we're done and then go see the movie.
Hit pause, go watch the movie, come back. Starting now. Hit pause, go ahead. You can do it. I trust you. Tap the screen. Hit the pause button. All right, you back? Cool. So either way it gets to the end, Batman ends up accepting all of the blame upon himself, all of the blame of everything that has happened. He says, it's mine. It's my weight to bear. I will bear it so we can see justice and good prevail in this terrible situation. And this is the part where we get to where they actually say it in the movie. And it's Gordon talking to his son. And his son's trying to understand, why is Batman running? Why is he leaving? He did nothing wrong. What's going on? What's with the cops? They're chasing Batman. What's going on? And he's trying to convey to him that he's not, he's the hero we deserve, but he's not the one that we need right now. We don't need to see him as a hero, because that burden that he carries, we need to vilify him for our own sake as a people to attain the justice and to make the system work the way it's supposed to. So, he will be a silent guardian for us. He will always be watching and always trying to protect us. He will be a dark knight. And the movie kind of ends on that note, and it really gives credence to the stylized heroism of Batman. He's not, as much as he's a hero, he is also an anti-hero in situations and things that he has to do. Though he does have the one rule of not murdering anyone to contend with, and it weighs on him heavily, but he understands what he has to do. And I feel like calling him a Dark Knight is a good representation of the character. It really hadn't been something that had been used a lot up to that point. So but yeah, go watch that movie. Wait, if you didn't pause and watch the movie. If not, you're stuck. You have to finish the podcast.
I don't know if I'm going to be the anti-hero or a hero at all. But Steve, put the knife down. Put the scissors down. Okay.
I don't have any.
Yeah, you know what? Batman he's that character. So Dark Knight fits him perfectly as far as the essence of what he is trying to do as a, I don't know, vigilante, Avenger, wherever you want to put him. The Dark Knight fits that because he comes out at night. He does all his handiwork at night, and he uses the darkness to invoke fear into the hearts of those he's trying to bring to justice, we'll say. So very cool. Love that movie. It's a very good movie. Love Christian Bale as Batman. I think he's one of the better Batmans.
Me too.
Evolutions of Batmans that have been out there.
Yep.
George Clooney, I never understood, but Christian Bale, totally understand. Makes total sense. And I really like Gary Oldman as Commissioner Gordon also.
I liked Michael Keaton as Batman, and I liked Christian Bale.
Yeah, I agree with that. Michael Keaton as well. They were very dark.
Yes, because Batman's a dark character. He's about as dark as they get as a hero.
Other than the voice actors that did the cartoons and animations and movies and stuff like that, Michael Keaton and Christian Bale are the only two live action film that are more true to the character.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree. Very much so. So, Karen, did you have another? What was your other?
Well, I guess it's going to be a Hitchcock extravaganza because my second movie's a Hitchcock 1-2. It didn't think about that. I was just thinking about movies that
good movies.
Movies where the titles explain what the movie's about. So my second movie is Strangers on a Train. And it stars Farley Granger, Robert Walker. Unfortunately, it's Robert Walker's last film. He dies 8 months after this movie's made due to an allergic reaction to a drug.
That's too. If I'm not misreading, that's 2 movies on a train where people meet.
Yeah, Alfred Hitchcock loved trains.
He
So, I
did.
mean, trains trains show up. I mean, trains have a major role in North by Northwest, another extremely well-known film of his. Strangers on a Train, well, you know, the train is practically a character in that movie. And then, you know, in Suspicion, Johnny Aisgarth and Joan Fontaine's character's name, Monkey Face, meet on a train. You know, they have a chance meeting on a train, and the train.
Isn't the other one Gregory Peck and Ingrid Bergman? Don't they end up on a train? And what was that movie?
The Paradigm Case or Spellbound or
Spellbound. Train again.
Yeah.
In fact, Alfred Hitchcock gets off of a train while they're at the train station.
Right. So yeah, the man likes trains, but that's cool because I like trains too. So, but anyway, what happens here is that Farley Granger plays a tennis pro, and what is his name? His name is Guy Haines, and Robert Walker plays Bruno Antony. And the Bruno Antony name was kind of a tip or kind of a little bit of a gallows homage to the kidnapper and killer of the Lindbergh baby. This movie was made in 1951. So what had happened to the Lindbergh baby was, you know, still very much, you know, in the consciousness, in the American consciousness, and you know, the world consciousness, really. So, and then you have Ruth Roman, who plays Anne Morton. Ruth Roman played Guy Haines's girlfriend / fiance. And her father is played by Leo G. Carroll, who plays Senator Morton. The other interesting thing about this movie is that Alfred Hitchcock's daughter, Patricia Hitchcock, has a role in this movie. She has a co-starring role as Barbara Morton. She's the sister to Anne Morton, the younger sister. And then Casey Rogers plays Miriam Joyce Haynes, who is the wife of Guy Haines. So Guy Haines is this well-known tennis pro, and he, you know, he's also just very sort of like cagey and clever and just thinking about, you know, well, how can he parlay his tennis career into something else and maybe politics or whatever. And he's not in love with his wife, Miriam Joyce Haynes. And I guess that becomes relatively well known because he makes some disparaging comments about her off and on. And she doesn't want to give him a divorce. And that's pretty evident because generally speaking, you know, wives don't want to give their husbands divorces or vice versa. So that's just kind of the way things go. So somehow he meets up with Bruno Antony or Robert Walker on the train, and they get to chatting. And Robert Walker's character, you know, it's kind of interesting because, you know, Steve, you were talking about Heath Ledger as the Joker and how he just completely keeps the audience off balance with, you know, psychotic behavior 1 second and logical behavior, and then it morphs back into, you know, reasonable, and then, but then, you know, really psychotic, and then back to murderous, or, you know, just all over the place. And Robert Walker's character was kind of like that in a way too, because he's very engaging, but there's also something a little maniacal about all this engagement. Like, you know, you're sitting there, you're minding your own business, and this guy just starts talking to you. And these days it's like you wonder, well, why is he spending so much time talking to me? But in those days, I mean, that was basically 60, 65, 66 years ago. I guess people just thought, he's just being friendly. But there's just something about the friendliness. It's like, okay, we're just having a polite conversation. We're making small talk. But then the small talk goes on and on and on. And it's like, okay, why is he asking more and more personal questions? And why is he insinuating more and more things about what he thinks he knows about my personal life? And why does there seem to be like this like real need to keep engaging me? Like this has gone way beyond the, hey, you're a person on a train and why don't we just chat for a bit stage. This is like, okay, what's your real agenda here stage? It moves into that pretty quickly. And he tells them, because the Bruno Antony character really doesn't have a firm grip on reality, So all he knows is he wants to be free. He doesn't like his father. And he can identify, he thinks, with Guy Haines because he's like, hey, here's a guy, he's handsome like I am. He's smart like I am. And he's got somebody in his life who's kind of keeping him down, just like I do, except that Guy Haines has his wife who's sort of keeping him down, and I can really relate to that because my father's really keeping me down. So we should get together. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. So why don't we pool our forces and just, sort of eliminate our collective problems? Wouldn't that be awesome? And he really does truly think this is awesome. And like the notion that somehow there might be something wrong with that doesn't ever really occur to him. The only possible obstacles are, law enforcement, but there's absolutely nothing wrong with removing these people who are in the way.
Right.
Just completely and utterly in the way. So just move them out the way. And Guy Haines is like, what are you, wackadoo? Well, yeah. and there's another point in the movie where somebody calls Bruno Antony crazy and he gets really like bent out of shape over being called crazy because crazy people don't like being told that they're crazy. They think they're sane.
I'm not crazy. You're crazy.
Yeah, right. And so yes, and Guy Haines is like, oh please, and he just goes off. The train goes into the station. Guy Haines goes off to live his life, except that his wife ends up dead. and in the beginning of the movie, this is not the end of the movie; it's the beginning of the movie.
Oh, okay. Oh, gee, I was like curveball.
Yeah, no. His wife ends up dead, and
I thought it was like he hops off the train and then it like flashes his wife's dead, and then that was it. Like
no. In the very beginning of the movie, his Guy Haines' wife is dead, is dead, and she's been, it looks like foul play. The police aren't entirely sure, but it looks like foul play, and. Usually the husband's a suspect in these matters. So, of course, the police want to question Guy Haines. And they're just little indicators around the murder scene that seem to imply that maybe Guy Haines might have had something to do with it. Well, since Guy Haines wants a political career, and since he's already involved with Ann Morton, who's the daughter of a United States senator, he can't afford for any scandal to fall on him at all. And he finds himself increasingly being cornered to the point where he has to deal with Bruno Antony. And Bruno Antony's like, well, you really need to kill my dad because my dad's kind of pissing me off. And, he's old, but he's really bringing me down. So, help me out here because I help you out. Remember, we had this deal, and Guy Haines is like, we never had a deal. I thought you were wackadoo. He's like, nah, you didn't really say that at the time. You didn't say no, so I thought you meant yes. So I went ahead and did it, and so that's how whoa. So, and Guy Haines is like, oh crap, what do I do? Do I actually kill this man's father? Because I really don't want to do that, or do I? You know, do I bring the police in? Well, no, I can't do that because that'll create problems for my fiance and her father and, you know, all this other stuff. So I can't do that. And then but if I don't, then they'll suspect me. So it just ends up being like this web that just gets pulled tighter and tighter and tighter. Ray Chandler gets credit for the main credit for writing the screenplay. However, he really wasn't the architect of the screenplay. It was really a man named Zenzi Ormond. And there were other people who were involved in writing the screenplay. And it's really a well-done screenplay. The interplay between the characters from a script standpoint is really intriguing. It's like, you know, it's interesting. You had Guy Haynes, who's a tennis pro, and then you've got this interplay between Bruno and Guy, which felt like a tennis match. You know, you felt like the ball of, you know, who's going to get the blame and who's going to get suckered and was like getting batted back and forth between the two of them. So that was really interesting. The other thing, of course, the direction. I mean, it's Alfred Hitchcock, so the direction was brilliant. There's a scene in the movie with the carousel that goes out of control, and a man crawls under the carousel to try to stop it. That scene was not done with trick photography. They actually had a carousel on the set going out of control and a man crawling under the carousel to try to stop that. And Alfred Hitchcock famously said later it was the most dangerous stunt he had ever done, and he would never do that again, and he didn't. So you have that. You have the intricate storyboarding that went on. And you also had, I mean, even though Alfred Hitchcock was by this time very well regarded in the movie industry, he still had bosses, he still had suits who were telling him what to do. So, and censors. So there was all this pressure to have a specific type of ending to the movie. And there was all this pressure to sort of, you know, do the story differently than the book. He had the rights to the book, but so he could film it theoretically any way he wanted to. But then the studio was like, you know, maybe we should not do it this way or that way. What Alfred Hitchcock would do to sort of get around that, and he did this in Suspicion as well, is he spent a lot of time on this. He would come up with ways to edit the film, to shoot the film so that it could only be edited one way. And if it wasn't edited in that way, then it was ruined.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. To keep the suits from messing with his stuff. So that's
really smart.
I know. And he did this with strangers. He did this with Strangers on a Train. Now, one thing that became apparent, I mean, if he liked you, he was a dream to work with. If he didn't like you, he made your life hell. He loved Robert Walker because Robert Walker was his first and only choice to play Bruno Antony. So they got along great. However, the studio insisted that Anne Morton be cast in the role of Ruth Roman. And Alfred Hitchcock didn't like that, so he made Ruth Roman's life a living hell. And even Robert Walker said, well, you know, the way that Alfred Hitchcock operates, it's like he has to have one person on the set that he can harass. And that person was Ruth Roman. So, you know, because he didn't like her. And he didn't like the fact that she was forced on him. And he didn't think she had any sex appeal. He didn't think, I mean, she probably wasn't blonde enough for one. And he didn't think that she exuded enough warmth or anything. So he just wasn't that impressed with her. Patricia Hitchcock, actually, Alfred Hitchcock is also famous for always having a cameo in his films. Well, he had a cameo in this film, and Patricia Hitchcock, his daughter, directed him in that, which must have been surreal for her. And another interesting story is that there's also a Ferris wheel in the movie, because part of the movie takes place at an amusement park. And Patricia Hitchcock's character, she plays the little sister, Barbara Morton, is on the Ferris wheel. Well, in real life, Patricia Hitchcock was afraid of heights, and she did not want to get on the Ferris wheel. Her father said, okay, well, I'll give you $100 if you'll do it. And she just, finally acquiesced and got on the Ferris wheel. Well, once she got to the top of the Ferris wheel, Alfred Hitchcock ordered the Ferris wheel shut down and all the lights turned out for like 5 seconds. Scared the living crap out of her. So then, and the Ferris wheel gets safely back down to the ground, and he did not give her the money. And she said he was so sadistic. He was just such a sadistic parent. Is it any wonder that I'm as messed up as I am as a human being? This is what I have to deal with. Okay, she didn't say all that. But anyway, she did say he was pretty sadistic for doing that to her.
But when you were in her mind, that's what you thought she said.
I could hear her saying that. I could totally hear her saying that. This movie was nominated for Best Cinematography, and Alfred Hitchcock did get a Directors Guild of America nomination for Best Direction in this movie. And this is a movie, it makes a lot of list of best films and films that you really need to see. If you consider yourself at all a film noir aficionado, you have to see this film. It's one of the best examples of this particular genre. Robert Walker is just wonderful in this movie, and it's just so sad that he died at a relatively early age. I think he was in his 40s when he died. And Farley Granger, also did a really great job. I mean, he was like the typical, straight-laced, handsome, kind of perfect candidate, but also perfect patsy for this movie. And he really, I think he really did a good job of playing that particular character. And the interplay between he and Robert Walker was also really, really well done. The other unwritten sort of subtext to this movie was Bruno Antony and how he really felt about Guy Haines. And again, this was 1951, and the censors were very much controlled what could and could not be shown in movies. So Alfred Hitchcock and Robert Walker worked out this really elaborate sort of series of gestures and that sort of implied that Bruno Antony was homosexual and had an attraction for Guy Haines. But they worked out these very subtle sorts of cues and gestures that escaped the notice of the censors. Because if it had ever been said or openly implied that that's what was going on, the movie never would have gotten off the cutting room floor. So that's what they did. So anyway, it's a really interesting movie. And I think if you look at this 1951 movie with 2018 eyes, it's obvious that, that Bruno Antony, is attracted to Guy Haines. But in 1951, you would have taken quite a long trip on maybe another train to get there.
Wow. Oh, wow. Okay. That was cool. It's funny. I saw this movie years ago. Always liked Farley Granger. Farley Granger and Alfred Hitchcock, obviously, a very good relationship because he's in a really good movie called The Rope.
Yep.
With Jimmy Stewart.
Yep.
And where in that movie he is a murderer of the horrible, horrible kind. What does I want to say? Of the aristocracy. Anyway. Well, the last movie that I have, and I'll be brief because we're getting kind of long in the tooth, is a movie. Again, our subtext here is we're talking about movies that the name is actually what the movie's about. Well, this movie stars Eddie Murphy, came out in 2016, and it's a relationship movie where a mother who's relatively young and her daughter live together, and the woman, although she is not married, she has an admirer, a sugar daddy, we'll say, that loves her very much, but obviously can't be with her because he's married. Well, the situation gets dire when something happens to the mother where she needs help in raising the child. So the sugar daddy, as a gift, basically loans the two women, or the lady and her child, a man who is there to take care of her, cook for her. And the name of the movie and the man that is sent to be the gift is Eddie Murphy, and his name is Henry Church, and the name of the movie is Mr. Church. It's a really good movie. And basically, it's the dynamic between the three people: Mr. Church, who comes to cook on certain days to help this woman who's having a physical issue, and it just helps her to help raise the child. And the dynamic between the mother and the child, and then the child and Mr. Church. Very different situations in how the perception of each person and how they relate to Mr. Church directly, and how a chance situation becomes more and more evolved as time goes on. This is a wonderful film. Takes a few twists and turns. You find that even in the best of situations, even in the kindest and nicest of situations, there are very heartbreaking and very dire situations that occur in the relationships between people. And then you find out later on that it's not just the mother and daughter who are having issues, but Mr. Church himself has his own demons. This is a very good movie. It's a pretty sad situations that occur in the film, but it helps the journey of the film so much. And it goes over where this relationship was only supposed to last 6 months, and it lasts 15 years. So I would urge anyone who's looking for a movie that shows a great deal about relationships and how people relate to each other who come from very different backgrounds, and people who have a parent who has health issues and how they deal with those health issues. This is a really good movie for that as well. So again, another movie where this is about Mr. Church and how he affects this small family, and how he too is affected by their kindness and their love for each other. And it's a movie called Mr. Church, and it's about Mr. Church. Yeah, baby. Short and sweet, but a really good movie. It took me a long time to watch it because I'd seen a trailer or two, and it wasn't really that impressive to me. But one day I thought, I've been putting this movie off so long. And then when I watched it, I was like, wow, this is a movie I should have just watched it up front.
And Eddie Murphy plays Mr. Church.
Eddie Murphy plays Mr. Henry Church. Yep.
And I the reason I bring that up is because, people know Eddie Murphy as a comedian, but I think he's an amazingly talented actor. He's like, he can do serious roles. I mean, he hasn't had as much success with the serious roles that he's done. When he plays, he has much more box office success if he plays like some other character in a comedic setting. But like, I'll never forget his performance in Dreamgirls. I just thought he stole the show. He
I was
stole
about
the
to say
movie.
that. I was about to say that. I was about to say one of his better films, which shows an array of his talent, because the guy can sing too.
Yep.
He sings in this movie in Dreamgirls, and then you watched his the height of his career and the fall of his career
Yep.
in Dreamgirls, and it's so dramatic and it's so well done. And I
Mm-hmm.
thought that's another reason why I gave this movie a second shot, because I knew previously how well he had performed in Dreamgirls, that I thought, I should give this a shot, because I know he's a good dramatic actor.
Yep.
Yeah, I think he should get. I would love to see him in future roles as a dramatic actor, as opposed to a comedic or a melodramatic actor.
Yeah, me too. I think he would acquit himself very well.
Yes,
This
indeed,
is
and he does so in Mr. Church.
this is actually the least expensive film, production budget wise, he's ever been in.
But you know what? It doesn't take much. And ironically, just like Message from the King, it's a movie that didn't get a lot of press. It's a movie that's kind of
Under the radar.
under the radar, but yet probably one of his better movies.
Interesting. Thank you.
You're welcome. And I hope people out there who actually took time to stay with us and hang out with us, and also, as Steve alluded to, come back.
Well, he sent them away, so they have to come back.
Well, thankfully, we have a YouTube channel, so you can come back to A Real Point of View at any time.
Yeah, they paused it and left it up and
for hours,
and then they watched the movie. Yes, and then they came back and they unpaused it. That's exactly what happened. Do you know how many times I've done that?
I don't even want to think about that.
I've done that a few times, actually.
A lot.
I'll start watching one thing, I'll pause it, watch something else, and come back. So I do that. I do that.
Well, it's not even that. Like, somebody opens a suggestion, pause, or somebody goes, "Hey, I talked about this one time before. Pause this and go back and check that." And then I'm like, "Cool." Pause. And then I watch that for like 20 minutes, and I come back and I unpause. Are you ready?
So, Steve,
here we go.
Let me ask you a question. Do you ride trains much?
Oh, let me pause. Let me pause.
I've only ever been on one train.
Okay.
Well, I've only ever
Why are you asking
in one train. I've been on like 6.
Why are you asking him that?
I'm just asking if he's ever met Alfred Hitchcock. Get a few things off his chest. Should I be calling Tina?
Where is that pause button?
Should I be calling Tina to tell her to get out the house?
I have never been on the Orient Express.
Oh, God.
Ever visit the Hounds of the Baskervilles? No, I'm just kidding. That's another train, and it's different detective. Okay.
Yes.
I was like, you went there, Greg, and then I was just like, is he going to catch himself? Does he realize what he just did?
No.
I know. I'm getting older, but I'm not seeing out yet.
You know what would be really awesome? A crossover movie between those two.
The Hound of the Baskervilles and Strangers on a Train?
No, Hercule Poirot and
Sherlock Holmes.
Oh, I don't think Hercule Poirot and Sherlock Holmes would get along at all.
I know.
Not at all. That's the
point. Amazing.
That's the point.
And Benedict Cumberbatch has to play Sherlock Holmes.
Well, David Suchet would have to. I mean, David Suchet is the only Hercule Poirot who's worth talking about. I love David Suchet. Absolutely adore him as an actor.
Yes. Even when he was trying to kill the president off of Air Force One.
I know. Well, no, that was executive decision.
Oh, it was executive decision?
He was the terrorist in executive decision.
I knew it was one of those. I know those president plane things.
Gary Oldman was the terrorist in Air Force One.
You're right. My bad. Just goes to show you, just don't believe what the press says all the time.
Right.
especially the Russian press.
But yes, I love David Suchet, but I can't see those characters getting along at all. They would be worse than oil and water.
It would be amazing.
They would be. That would be fun. That would be fun. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's that time again where we're all three of us are like about to fall asleep because we've had such a big, long day. Well, thank you very much for listening to us here on A Real Point of View. We hope some of the movies that we mentioned tonight, you give them a shot, give them a chance, and do yourselves a great service in watching the films. We're pretty sure you enjoy them. Thank you again for hanging out, and check us out on our YouTube channel, A Real Point of View, and all the other different episodes that we have on there in our archive. And listen to what we're saying about some other wonderful films. And we'll be back again with some more new and also some classic films that you may have missed, and try to share that information with you. So take care. Have a good night. Good night, Karen. Good night, Steve.
Good night.
And good night, everybody out there in TV land.
YouTube land.
YouTube land, TV land, streaming land. And ironically,
Internet land.
And you can even get us on Kodi. So yes. And have a good night. Good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Steve.
Boy.
All right, there you go.